Today I'm going to do a comparison of the Casio G-Shock GA-2100, also known as the Casioak, and the DW5600E. If you aren't super familiar with these watches, DW5600E is basically the classic G-Shock based on the original 1983 release. The Casioak GA-2100 is a much more recent watch, released in 2019. There's plenty of variations of these watches with solar, multi-band, Bluetooth, etc. But the ones I have here are the base versions, and I think what I cover here will stand for the rest of the variations. Onto design. There's definitely some similarity in their design with the flat bezel and integrated band. As I've covered in my separate videos on each of these watches, I think they both have some similarity with the AP Royal Oak, and I think the 5600 actually looks a bit like the Patek Philippe Nautilus. It's just such a cool look, made even cooler because of the ruggedness of these watches. The Casioak is a combination of analog and digital versus the 5600's digital only. The fact that Casioak is analog opens up heaps of options for design variation. For example, my one here with the 3-dimensional hour markers and a combination of purple and orange colouring. The design of Casioak certainly makes it more fun for me versus the 5600. But if I had to choose one to wear every day, I think it would be the 5600. It weighs a bit smaller than the Casioak, both in terms of width on wrist and thickness. They're both very comfortable watches actually, but the 5600 is literally the most comfortable watch I own. However, the equation does change where I'm rotating through a few different watches in my collection, and I think that's where the Casioak is so fun. It's a great way to wear something loud and different without needing to commit a lot of outlay into it. In contrast, 5600 can, if you get a subtle colour, fly under the radar a bit more. It makes for a great everyday watch, but not at all to say that the Casio can't be an everyday watch. We're splitting hairs here. So I know it's a cop-out, but design-wise, it comes down to what you prefer. They both look awesome. So now on to functionality, and this is where I think the two watches diverge a bit more. So let's start with what they have in common. They both have the trademark G-Shock resin outer, 200 meters of water resistance, and they both have the same timekeeping functions. Stopwatch, timer, alarm, etc. Where they diverge is that the 5600 is your textbook digital watch, whereas a Casioak is a hybrid analog digital. It has the analog hands and then a very small digital screen in the lower third. For me, I find the small screen on my Casioak quite hard to read, especially if I'm using the stopwatch to time something. Although, to be honest, the only thing I time is my steak on the barbecue. The analog function on the Casioak also doesn't have a seconds hand, so again, a little tricky if you're timing something and want to use the seconds hand. In the dark, the 5600 is also easier to read. It has a great backlight that lights up the full display, whereas the Casioak has quite weak lume on the hands, and the small display is quite hard to see with the backlight. Overall, the 5600 is easy to read no matter what function you're using or time of day. It just doesn't get in the way of what you're doing. So functionality wise, the 5600 is a clear winner for me. So they're both awesome watches and pretty similar overall, but which one should you get? I'll try and keep this simple and address two perspectives. I think the first perspective is you're a first time watch or first time G-Shock buyer. If that's you, I think get the 5600. It's just such an awesome watch and will fly under the radar a bit more of the time as an everyday watch. It's also a bit more user friendly with the all digital display, which makes it easier to tell the time. The second perspective is if you already have a few watches and want to dive into the G-Shock world. In this situation, I'd probably say choose whichever one you like the look of, unless you need a true tool watch to tell the time with, in which case, again, it's the 5600. For me, I love both, but the 5600 is just a masterpiece. And the Casioak has so many cool colorways, but is ultimately derivative, whereas 5600 is a perfect blend of design and function. So if you need an only watch or a tool watch, go the 5600. If you want something fun or a bit of variety, go the Casioak. And if you're like me, get both. So comment down below, which one would you pick, and if it's neither, which one did you get? Thanks for watching. If you have a moment, please like and subscribe.